Could Davinci Resolve 16 and the Sony a7 III be the perfect combination? Let's take a look. Hi, my name is Donovan, and I think that Davinci Resolve 16 and the Sony a7 III are an excellent combination. Here are some reasons why. So I went on a shoot earlier today, and I was shooting with my a7 III. I had the Tamron 28-75. I brought it into Resolve, and I was really happy with the results that I got. And I'm kind of noticing a trend. Every time I bring my S-Log footage into Resolve, Resolve just seems to be such excellent software to be able to manipulate this footage and get it to look exactly how you want it to. And I wanted to show you a little bit of that right now. Okay, so here I am in Resolve, and I'm actually in the color tab. Let me show you kind of how I have it put together with my edit tab. And really all I did was I pulled up, let me turn this down just a bit. I pulled up my footage in here, just kind of dropped it on the timeline, and then I got it. I went into color and applied a few nodes to each clip individually, and some of them I went a little more complicated on. I'll maybe go into that into another video, but I wanted to talk a little bit about just how well this footage reacts, or how well Resolve is able to manipulate it and still get it to look good. And this is a perfect example right here, this shot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a new project, and I'm going to walk through kind of step by step, and also explaining what I'm doing with each step, and show you why I think this really is the perfect combination as far as, you know, software and camera goes. Now, don't get me wrong, you can get, if you're a great filmmaker, if you're a creative producer that can, you know, kind of has that creative eye, you can use different software, different hardware. I'm not saying this is the be all and end all, but I just wanted to recognize that for starting filmmakers, a7 III right now is like $1,700. It's on sale because I guess there's a rumored a7 IV coming out, and then Davinci Resolve 16 is free. I'm doing all this with the free version. I actually don't even own the full version of Resolve. I may in the future, but so far I haven't had a need for the full version yet, because the free version is just so powerful, and I really hope that Blackmagic Design keeps that trend of, you know, making their free software so good that everyone starts using it, right? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save this, and I'm going to open a new project here. I'm just going to name it YouTube Project, and I'm going to go into my media pool, and I already have all of it organized here, but the clip that I'm going to use is right, I can't remember. Okay, it's right here. Okay, so I'll use this clip here. And by the way, I have my timeline set to 24 frames per second at 1080p because I've just been primarily using 1080p. So that's what that is. I'm just going to bring that in, and I'm going to, let's look at our media pool here. I have dual screens, but I'm just recording on the one right now so you can see everything nicely. So you can just, one thing I like about Resolve is how it's laid out. You can customize and adjust it. Even in the free version, you have some limited customization, which is super cool. So I'm going to pull up my media footage here, double click on it to bring it into my kind of inspector or viewer, not inspector, sorry, that's different, my viewer here. And you can actually pull clips from here if you push I on your keyboard and then O right here, it'll actually create in and out points just from hovering over. But this clip is long enough where I'm going to actually need to come in and fine tune it. So I have this clip where we went out in this snow and it was really cold. But anyway, so let me grab right. I got a nice close up here. Okay, right here. So I'm going to cut it here. So I can put my in point there and then go to right about there, my out point. And then I'll drag the video onto my timeline. Now for my laptop can handle it, but just for editing convenience, I actually like to come over here to timeline view options, change it to just like the small icons, just the plain ones. But then I turn audio back on and I actually make the video clips just a little bigger until I can see the line right there to give me more information about the video. And then I like to raise the audio back up as well. And I'll show you why here in just a second. But so right here is the shot that I'm going to be using. And of course that's in real time. I filmed it at 60 frames per second. So if you hit Control R, and if you see here, when you hit Control R, you actually get speed change text right here at the top of the clip. So that's saying that the clip is in like a retime mode. So if you hover your mouse over to the edge of the clip, if you're on the edge right here, the top corner within this upper space of the clip, I can zoom in a little so you can see better, and you click and drag, then you can kind of dynamically change the clip speed. So you can change the length of the clip and it will automatically retime the clip to compensate, to be able to fill the time. And you can, if you need to extend the clip, you just move your mouse down here and then you can extend the clip without adjusting the time at all. So that's really nice, really nice to have. So then I can select it, hit Control R again so I can get rid of those controls if I don't want them just hanging around. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to get into, in my opinion, one of the most important parts of any sort of filmmaking, and that's color. Now, this shot was, if I remember right, I was using my 28-75. I think I was at 75 millimeters, f2.8. I had my my K&F concept set to I think the lightest mode for my ND filter, and then I was 1/100th of a second at 60 frames per second, because I find when you retime the clip back down to about 24 frames per second, which in this case is between 40 and 50% of the actual speed of the clip, when you retime it down, 1/100th of a second is pretty good as far as natural motion blur at that speed. So again, it's the I think it's called the 180, the 1/2 rule. I can't remember what it's called, but basically it's where you need to have your shutter speed be double your frame rate. Unless you have ridiculous frame rates, then you can, adjust accordingly. But between 24 and 120 frames per second, you should usually double your frame rate, or excuse me, not your frame rate. You should usually double your shutter speed in conjunction with your frame rate. Anyway, so I think color is really important. Now, when I filmed this, I was in daylight because we were in daylight situations. And then when we got to this point, I forgot to switch over to like shade or cloudy, or do a custom white balance, which also works really well. And so when I filmed this, it turned out a little bit blue. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So what I do when I'm working in color here is I bring in, I have the clip selected here. And here are my nodes, or basically just a node is just a specific adjustment that it's making to the clip. And you, I like to add corrector nodes that have like maybe 1 or 2 tasks, so it doesn't break the footage down super quickly. Because if you just add all the effects to the original clip node, then the footage breaks down a little faster, which is another reason why I love Resolve so much, because it has this node system instead of just, applying color grading effects to the clip, which still work really well in other software, but I really like this method. So in my node area, I'm going to right click and add a node, and I just like to use correctors. And then I'm going to click and drag it until it highlights this yellow, because I need it to be connected through the input and output, or else it won't affect the original clip. And then I'm going to rename this, and I'm going to name it exposure. I like to do exposure first. So in my exposure, I'm going to come down to my color wheels here. These are the primary wheels, and this is lift, gamma, gain, offset. Now, those can be kind of scary, they can be kind of scary looking, but it's actually pretty simple. Basically, these are my blacks, these are my shadows, these are my mids and highs. And the reason why I say that is because these correctors actually have a farther reach. So when you adjust the blacks or the shadows, you're actually adjusting all of them, you're adjusting the shadows more than the mids and the highs. And so if you want your traditional, shadows, midtones, highlights, then you click on color wheels log, right? You go to the log. But these ones only affect specific parts of the image. So for example, if I were to adjust highlights, it's only adjusting highlights. And so there's pros and cons to doing that. I personally stay here. The naming is a bit strange, lift, gamma, gain, but it's fine. So the first thing that I do is to adjust exposure is I come here to offset, which is the total exposure of the entire image. And I'll maybe bring it down just a little bit. And I'll come back and probably change this a little bit, but this is what I'm going to do right now. And I'll maybe bring this, and then I'll bring my shadows down just a little bit. Whoop, not that much. There we go. Yeah, so I'll bring my shadows down a bit, and then maybe my midtones just a hair. And it looks like it's starting to get a little too dark, so I'll brighten it back up. Okay, so that's pretty good. And then within the exposure, I usually throw in a little contrast as well. Maybe lift the shadows back up since that contrast punched the shadows. You can see I like to edit the clips dynamically. So, I don't just say, oh, that looks good, and then leave it alone and hope that it turns out. Like, I'll kind of jump back and forth. Okay, so that looks pretty good as far as exposure is concerned. So I'm going to add another node here if I can get it to go through. Okay. And I'm going to rename this one to color/white balance. And I've recently started to combine these nodes, and you can organize your nodes however you want. So, if you have a node for each individual adjustment, that works. It's just that it's a little more work. So I like to give a node either 1 to 2 jobs. That way I can cut down on how many I have. So this is color and white balance. So within this one, I'm going to bring color back to the image. That now you can see why I was saying that my white balance was off, because I brought the color back to the image and it's really blue. But this is where I can adjust the white balance in post. So I'm going to bring this up and over like this. I use the offset and this center dot, and that will adjust the color within that spectrum of light. So this is adjusting the color for the entire image. This one would adjust it for the entire image, but more so for the shadows, more so for the midtones, more so for the highlights, etc. So I'm going to come through, and that actually looks pretty good. Maybe a little less green, so I'll bring it up until it looks pretty good. So like that. And you can see that my image is still not very saturated. So I may actually go back to the original image node here and even boost the saturation here too, like that. And then I'll come back to my color and white balance and adjust it even a little bit more like that. Now, what I'm noticing here is I think I'm a little overexposed. So I'm going to come to my exposure, I'm gonna bring that down. There we go. That looks pretty good. Okay, it's starting to look good. And yeah, so if I push play on that, you can see that starting to get the color back into it, getting the life back into that image. So now I can probably, it still looks a little bit desaturated. So you'll notice that if I add saturation back to the original image, it's adding it back to the original image with the original colors, and that's before I've adjusted exposure and the white balance. So adding saturation back to the image is also, if I go back to here, adding saturation back to the image here, you can see, is doing it before my color adjustments. So I'm actually going to okay, there we go. Okay, so let's add another one here. And what I'll actually do is, I know I mentioned that I like to give nodes multiple jobs, but I think in this case I'm actually going to take the saturation out of this one, rename it to just white balance, and then make a saturation node. So that actually, as I was working on it, I actually think it'll work a little bit better to do it that way. So we add the saturation back into it. Then we can kind of go through with the white balance here, get it back where I want it, the exposure. And by the way, when you lighten an image, it reduces saturation, and when you darken an image, it increases saturation. That's just standard affair. So just be aware of that. Okay. Okay. All right, that looks pretty good. So I'm a big fan of the orange and teal look. I think it looks pretty cool. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to add a node, connect it, and I'm going to rename it to skin tones. Now, when you add a like a creative look to your footage or a grade, because mostly what I was doing now was color correction, just getting it to look relatively natural. But when you add a color grade, you want to make sure that you preserve your skin tones. At least in my opinion, you want to preserve skin tones. So to do that, I made a skin tone node, and I'm going to come down to this color picker, which is labeled qualifier. Basically, it's just a color picker. And I'm going to select kind of the mid-range of the skin here. Now, my image here doesn't update to what it's doing. You can see it right here, but that's kind of hard to see. So what I actually like to do is I like to enable split screen. And this is a really handy way to see what's going on with the image, right? So if I press play, you can see my qualifier is actually already doing a really good job at just selecting skin tones. And you can see some of the tones in the hair are the same as the skin tones. But I'm going to fine tune that a little bit. So I can, with this, my skin tones node selected inside my qualifier tab, I can fine tune it a little bit. It looks like the color's pretty good. I shouldn't have to adjust the hue too much. I can maybe get it so it gets the highlight on the nose right there. You can see I got that back. I can adjust saturation so it gets maybe just a little bit less of like the lips while still getting the shadows, so that's pretty good. And then luminance, I'd probably leave it alone, maybe right about there. Yeah, so I'll leave it alone. Now, while I'm still in this tab, I'm going to denoise it. Let me zoom in so we can see what we're doing here. I'm going to denoise it, so you can see there that smooths it out nicely. That's so you don't get weird like noise color correction in your image, right? So it's not like around the eyes, it's not like really fuzzy. And then I can increase the blur radius as well. So that's a pretty good selection. I like that. So now that we have that, I'm going to disable this so I can just see what I'm doing to the image. And then I can actually, just so you can see what I have selected, I'll adjust the hue. And it's only doing the hue on the qualifier that I did. So I know I have the right one selected there. That's perfect. And I'm going to go ahead and make those skin tones even more lush. I'm going to bring them out just a little bit. And then I'm going to probably I don't know if I want to increase contrast or not, maybe a little bit, just to make it so the skin just pops a little. And I can see here that my colors aren't perfect. So I can go back to white balance. You can see, there we go. Yeah. So if I add just a little more yellow and green into the image, like that. Okay, that looks good. I like that. Okay, now let's add the creative look. This is just for skin. This is just for the teal look. So I'm going to say teal. Now, there's two ways to go about this. You can, I can do another qualifier and select the skin tones so that my skin tones are preserved. I'm not putting any teal into the skin tones. And I can recommend doing that, but I think what I'll actually do is just show you the concept of adding teal or whatever creative color you want into the image, because it's really simple. So what I do is I click on the teal, and if you remember my color wheels over here, and you remember that this version, the primary wheels, the lift, gamma, gain, they adjust the whole image, but maybe more so shadows, more so midtones, more so highlights. So what I want to do is I actually want to select these ones with the shadows, midtones, and highlights specifically so that I can only adjust shadows. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just drag shadows down into the teal. And you can see it's already looking really good, right? Because then I can get that orange and teal look. And I could deselect my skin tones if I wanted to, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to do that. So, and you can see that I can make any color. So if I wanted it to be, you know, kind of a magenta, that's pretty cool. Like kind of has a film look. Like I could make it that look if I wanted to. And so, but I like the orange and teal, so I'm going to stick with that. But that's the cool thing, is that it's really simple to add a creative tone and it looks really good. So if I press play here, like there's not too much color shifting in the shadows, and there's not like any weird anomalies. Like it looks pretty good. My skin tones aren't perfect, but I'm pretty sure it's because I just filmed it in the wrong white balance. But because I was filming S-Log3 and there was so much data left in the video file, I was actually able to recover it and still get it to look pretty dang good. So this is looking really good. I really like this shot. So I'm going to go ahead and call that good. I like that. I'm going to go back to my edit tab, and you can see the difference, you know, in what we did to the image, but it looks really good. So I'm going to just press play here. Maybe make it full screen. And that looks pretty good. I like that. Come into focus just like that. So awesome. Okay, so I hope you liked watching me kind of work on this clip and show you through, you know, what I believe is a really good combination for, you know, a filmmaker to have, which is the Sony a7 III plus Davinci Resolve. Is it the perfect combination? I think so, but maybe I'm biased just because that's what I'm using personally. But I've shown you here that the flexibility that you have in color correcting and then putting a grade on top of it is quite a lot. You can do a lot with it. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.